Yeah, and the people you're talking to are very credible people. They have a track record. They're not just idea people. Yeah, they
Yes.
actually do stuff.
These are people who are in the food industry, who've been in the food industry, and are literally just sticking their neck out now, but actually saying, we will step in. So it's incredible what's happening.
Welcome to Richard Hawes' YouTube channel, which looks at what we can do today to make Hawaii Island a more sustainable place to live so our children and grandchildren and their grandchildren won't be priced out of here and will be able to stay in Hawaii and live good lives here. Today, we are talking with Alexey Katko, the purple potato guy, who we talked to once before here on the vlog. If you're interested in watching that previous video, which was also about Alexey's work with purple sweet potatoes that are so abundant on this island and so much of it going to waste, I will link that below. We're talking about more than just that today, though. It sounds like a lot has gone on since we talked to you back in August, Alexey. So back then, you were specifically talking about testing the viability of making purple sweet potato flakes and learning more about a potential market and that being a viable food product here. Tell us, first of all, about this long-term perspective you're now taking about food security.
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, what I learned in the food industry here is a lot of short-term thinking produces quick, short-term, upfront results. And so, if we start talking about the topic of we need to create more food security, we have to start thinking a lot more. As I would hear a lot of stories of how the Japanese would say 30-year vision is what they considered short-term. So for me, it's like if I'm going to build a company, let me start looking 300 years into the future. And what does that mean on building something today? Food security, that's one big thing. It requires a lot of investment, a lot of capital, both energy, time, and finances to set up. So it's like, what is the best possible business right now, food business that you can set up so that the next generation who takes over is set up to do a lot better than you did? And so for me, that's like if you're building short term, you're thinking much smaller investments and you're willing to take a lot less risk. But if you're thinking 300-year terms, all of a sudden you have to start thinking, who do I need to partner up with and work with to make sure this is going to be a viable, sustainable, and not just serving me as a human being and the people around in the business, but the state as a whole.
Wow, that's great. That's so interesting. How did you choose 300 years?
100 years is graspable to one human mind, but 300 years, it was a book I was reading a while back, and just that number stood out to me. It's like it's far enough where you have to start thinking, if three generations lived 100 years or were a part of this story, it's like you have to set things up for somebody to one person removed from you to make sure they succeed. So it's like it's now you can't do nothing to help them other than what you do today. Like the next generation, you could technically still intertwine with them, but those people, they have to succeed based off of the foundation you created today. There's no direct connection to that world, but what you do has a direct impact.
Oh, that is such an interesting perspective.
I like the way you're thinking about it because that's where we're going. Quite often, like Alexei mentioned, we look for the short term solution, but looking for the short term solution doesn't necessarily get future generations to where we want them to be to make decisions. It's like find two answers for every problem and one more just in case. Your mind has got to be open and constantly looking at alternatives, and they must be based on some kind of foundation. I see how Alexei is thinking. I like that.
Yeah, that does sound like what you're doing, Alexei. You're talking about building a foundation that works beyond just you and the next generation. That's amazing.
A lot of our food industry right now, the foundation is built off of importing food. We humans, and this is not to say anything against the current system, it's gotten to us where we are today, but it is much easier to import food than to figure out how do we grow it sustainably, and then learn how to process it and then bring it into our industry. And each one of those that I mentioned is a whole separate industry in and of itself. Even just distributing this food locally versus the imported food, that requires a lot of time, investment, and energy. And so a couple of years ago when I began on this journey and I brought it up to a local distributor here, and they laughed me out of the office like, we don't deal with this kind of this grade B stuff you're talking about. Again, it's not to bring them down, it's because their focus is right now make sure everybody's fed, and how do we make sure the greatest amount or enough profit that everybody succeeds that's within that that system.
Yeah, you had mentioned something about most businesses today focusing on profitability and increasing sales, and that you have a different view on it about putting us on a stronger footing.
Yes, I was watching an interesting interview with Jeff Bezos. If you look back through his history of people interviewing him, there was just outright people making fun of him. They're like, "Are you ever going to be profitable, man?" It's like the company makes money and it generates revenue and it generates a profit, but profitable for the investors was like a different story because they took all that money and poured it right back into the systems, to growing the systems. Because back then people thought, oh, it's an internet company. But now you look at it, it's like, no, it was never just an internet company. The goal was to create these distribution centers. Now you're in physical world. So I mentioned that as an example because in this, you're not just thinking about how do I start a business and make money. You're thinking about how do I work with farmers properly? How do I ensure I get product and produce? How do I know everything is coming in? That requires a whole set of investment. So if my goal is how to make the most amount of money for myself as the owner and say the investors, then it's like just shareholder value and they get all the money. But the purpose is the money you do make, that is the lifeblood of your company. You're pouring it back into there as much as you possibly can to grow it. Like I think I mentioned it last time that we eat a few billion pounds of food a year. And if we just want to bring our imports down by 1%, that means we have to produce and sell about 20 million pounds a year just to bring it down by 1%. There's a lot of room for need to invest into our food system. So that's what I mean by that. And it's like pouring it back into the right things that matter for a 300-year vision.
You mentioned grade B products. So tell us about that. Now, this has to do with the sweet potato project you've been working on. And I guess it started out with thinking about sweet potato flakes, and you've moved on a little bit. Just give us the overview of that picture now.
It began with reading all these studies, understanding what can we do at scale to capture the most amount of nutrition for the potatoes. And so the studies pointed, make the flakes. Flakes are the best. And people around the world do that in their farming industries. Then that got me to, okay, can I create these flakes? Figured out that yes, we can. And then as I was talking to the flake manufacturer, they're like, hey, we don't process produce. You have to send it to us in the form of, let's just say, I'll just use the term as a mashed potato. Okay, now I have to figure out how do you do that? How do you do that at scale? And going through the whole cycle again on figuring out who can make it at scale, only to start considering, well, why don't we start doing that here? So it went from the flakes are still on the table, so to speak. However, to get there, we need to be able to sustainably, effectively, and cost effectively produce mashed potato at scale. And then it's just like, why don't we just create that industry around that product and get it out into the marketplace here?
The sweet potato flakes that you had talked about, that is an idea of using these sweet potatoes that we have massive amounts of, grows here very well. A ton of it is thrown out. You said you could do that from grade B products. And it's something that is shelf stable. It's a way to use sweet potatoes into the future so they last longer, right? Such an interesting idea.
Yes.
Why would this industry be important to Hawaii?
Really, there's a direct and then there's the overarching reason. The direct is it's a starch product that we already grow at scale, at volume. And if we need to, we can grow bigger. People know this product here. People have tasted it. As to creating the industry means we're creating a bigger palette and use and consumption of the product. And why that's important, the way I'm seeing it is we're in the middle of the ocean here. So God forbid something happens, an asteroid or human-made disaster happens, say in California, where a lot of the food is exported from. We're getting a lot of our source, our sustenance comes from there through the shipping lanes. If something happens there, we have statistically, I remember I was reading a book on human psychology and when you don't have food. Once food stops coming in, you got 3-4 days before civil unrest starts coming in. Here on our island, we have maybe in theory, about a week's worth of food to cover usage. I want to start this industry here because it's about getting this food, the potato, into the marketplace here so that we're already used to eating it a lot more. So it becomes something that's a stable food. Right now, people know of it, they hear it, they eat it every once in a while. But if we get it there, and should things really go bad, we at least have a product that we already have learned and figured out how to grow, process, and distribute locally so that 4-day to a week period that we have before we start going crazy against each other, at least we have something to hold hold us over. And that's just like worst case scenario. But it's about getting it out there into the marketplace. And it's not changing the palate, but increasing the taste for the product so that people will naturally choose it.
I see it the same way, I come at it from an energy point of view because it takes energy to do work. But most of the energy we use is finite, fossil fuel and all the rest. What I come back to is that the primary source of energy is actually food. Although we talk about it like it's fossil fuel, it's not, it's food. So that's why it's so important, and why the subject that he's talking about and the way he's looking at it is so very important.
And Alexey, I heard you're looking for people for your team now. What kind of team are you putting together, and what kind of people are you looking for?
All of last year, it was just as I've been building this out, it's been the year of the R&D. Well, the last 2.5 years. As it's developing, it's becoming more and more complex because now it's just not me trying to create a food group. It's creating an industry. And so that's when I realized I'm like, oh man, I'm great at R&D. I'm great at developing products, and coming up with ideas on that and creating a network, and created a network over the years. Now, well, how do you do the business, or how do you do the financing? How do you find somebody who knows how to even put all these ideas together and bring it into reality? So each one of these phases is a whole skill set that people spend a lifetime learning. So right now it's going and finding people who have succeeded in the food world and partnering with them, seeing who's willing to partner, but not just any partnership. It's finding people who understand the vision, the kind of 300-year vision kind of thinkers who understand that it's going to require a lot of effort today. And it's like, when's the best time to plant the tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Today. And those are the kind of people I'm not just trying to find, say, financing, for example. It's not just any money. It's people who understand what this is about and what it's for. Finding people who are more into business development, people who are in food processing here. And so these are the team members that over the last couple of weeks since the beginning of the year, I've been speaking with. They've been hearing this story for the last couple of years. And now it's not just coming out of nowhere. They're like, you know what? Now that I'm saying, okay, this is serious, let's go with this. Do you have the guts to jump on this with me? And so that together, so it's up until now, it's like, it's been me. Now, this is not about me. This is about we to make this happen. The first and foremost is share the vision with you. Do you have the vision because it's going to require a lot of upfront energy, and theoretically this will work out. And I say that on purpose because people are like, don't say that. Like, the reality is it's going to require a lot of energy, time, and commitment upfront because we believe in what we can create. So yeah, that's first, and definitely skill sets second. It's like if management, finance management, that's a big one because that's what makes or breaks companies, learning to set those systems up. So those are the kind of people we're looking for.
And are you finding them?
Slowly but surely speaking with them. And it's like, the more the merrier, because it's, although it's going to start off small, but the potential for it to grow is really there. So the more people that are willing to be on board up front, the better. The APBs out there getting like, hey, if this world interests you, let's talk. Let's see what interests you have there, because it's going to require a lot of creativity and geniuses to make this happen. Like, my genius has come to the top or has found its maximum, and I know what role I play in. Hey, everybody out there, if you're out there and food is your thing and you really want to put your time and energy into it, more than happy to share with you the vision, and your skill sets would be greatly appreciated.
What kind of response do you get to this idea of a really long-term food security goal?
Although the intensity of making this happen is a lot higher, it's almost as if a peace comes over a person when you share this vision. They're like, oh wow, it's a different way of thinking. It's like, this is not about me, myself, and I making sure I get enough. This is about how do we succeed. And that kind of thinking, it's like, it resonates with people. A 300-year vision means working together to create a bigger pie so everybody has a bigger portion. It creates almost a community around the shared vision to say, let's lock arms and do this together. I have been blown out of the water these first 2 weeks of the year as I'm sharing this vision and making an ask of people, will you be interested to jump on board? And they're like, yes, and here's why. And then you hear it come back to you, and I get to hear it, why they're interested after just pitching them for like half an hour, and they're like, yeah, we all like to be part of something greater than just ourselves. And this is definitely one of those rare opportunities where we can create something greater than our own lifetimes as well.
I'm a big supporter, but I see my role as being not 300 years, but like the Hawaiians used to always be thinking 7 generations, into the future. And that I can see, and I can see Alexey's vision, and I can see me contributing to that vision. So I feel real, how should I say, happy, because in line with what I think. Yeah.
Any advice for Alexey as he goes forward?
Well, keep on doing what you're doing because I've watched Alexey from the start, and he's very well organized. And now he's going into the next phase, working with people to build a team. And I'm familiar with some of the people he's talking to, yeah, and they're very credible folks. Yeah, keep on doing what you're doing. I think you're on the right path.
One of the other things that, Leslie, I do want to share, other team members also include people who, although they don't want to participate in the business itself, like Richard is sharing the thoughts and ideas of, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered this? Or just giving ideas and giving guidance in that sense. That is also very invaluable because the right question is like 90% of fixing the problem already. Having people who are further ahead or have achieved things in business or working with groups of people to know the story, to be aware of it, but then share their wisdom if they're willing to do that. That's another kind of team member that's also important that we're going to be looking forward to working with.
One thing I think is very important, we here in Hawaii, we kind of think, the native people are Hawaiians. Actually, we're everybody. I mean, you look at a Hawaiian person, that Hawaiian person can look like any race because of all the mixtures, right? But then, when you go back and see how they came from where they came from, and how they adapted and utilized the environment to make sure that all the different parts were accounted for. I think it's really important that we bring into it that cultural aspect because it's all about us, yeah? It's us, and us is everybody.
Where are we at, Alexey, in terms of the sweet potato project, flakes and the mashed potatoes? What's happening with that right now?
Over the last month and a half, about 2 months, again, big picture is we do want to get our product into like government level purchasing. So we've been working with different distributors, having conversations with them, and they're like, okay, we're interested. We do have interest in this. Now, can you get us a sample of your finished product? And that's where we're at right now, is getting the right machinery to create the samples that we're actually producing out of here. So working with processing, figuring out what is it going to cost us here to process it. So running numbers, doing a business plan, understanding what it takes to produce here, but also getting the basic machinery to create the product so we can give it to the distributors, and then the distributors A-OK it, and then we can actually raise the capital to get all the machinery that we need and go ahead and actually start production. Definitely encourage people, if this resonates with you, even if purple potato does not resonate with you, but the food world does, I always keep going to the big picture. This is beyond the purple potato. This is about figuring out systems, because that we have not quite figured out here yet on a small island appropriate manufacturing and food processing. So what we're doing is different than what we have now, because this is what we need to thrive going forward. We're creating systems. Yes, we're starting with a sweet purple potato because we'll have a decent enough sized industry here to build out a system to say, okay, we can grow it, we can collect it, we can process it, and we can put it into our local marketplace as fast as possible, so that the potatoes is going from land to dishes. This is about creating a system. And once we've figured out the system, it's then replicating with other products. And there's a lot of opportunity here to do that. When it comes to the food and local food production and increasing that, it just looks like a lump of coal right now that we can make a diamond out of. So if you do have a passion for food and you really want to do something about that and food security, reach out. This is a rare opportunity for us as a whole and the future team to make this happen.
We have a tremendous amount of advantages sitting out here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, depending on things coming in. But we have tremendous amount of sunlight, which is energy. We have geothermal, which is energy. We have water coming out of Mauna Kea perpetually. So, just trying to leverage the pluses that we have into what Alexey is talking about, I think is tremendous.
This whole journey began with a simple question or seeing a problem. It began with seeing how much we throw away, something we shouldn't throw away.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again today, Alexey. This is really interesting to hear about your vision and your plans and what you're actually doing for increasing our food security here in Hawaii. Sounds like it's only a start on something that might keep expanding through time, and really interesting. Such an important topic.
Yes,
and
thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And thanks everyone for watching. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Richard Ha's vlog. Ahui ho.
Okay, aloha.
Aloha.